Sylvester Stallone had to sell the most precious thing he owned, his dog, in order to eat, because before becoming a legend of action cinema, he lost everything. He had no money, no job, and reached such a low point that he had no choice but to part with his only companion in order to survive. The only thing he had left was an idea he had been developing for years, the story of a man mistreated by life who becomes a boxer and faces the greatest champion of all time. He wrote a script with the intention of turning it into a movie so he could star in it, and later took it to several producers. Everyone loved the story, but they didn't want him to be the lead actor. They offered him up to $300,000 for the script, and even though he was living in poverty, Sylvester didn't sell it. Sylvester Gardencio Stallone was born in July 1946 in New York. His father chose that name in honor of his own father, Sylvester Stallone, an Italian immigrant who, upon arriving in the United States, changed a few things so it would sound more American. His arrival into the world was anything but easy. During the delivery, the doctors had to use forceps, an instrument placed on either side of the baby's head to help guide and ease the birth. But one of the maneuvers went wrong and caused him a permanent injury to a facial nerve. If you've ever seen photos or movies of Sylvester, you've surely noticed that characteristic expression on his face, especially on his lower lip. Well, that's something he's had since the day he was born. Although this will make life more difficult for him later on, for now he's still just a baby and grows up with his parents in Hell's Kitchen, one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in New York. His mother's name is Jackie, and she works as a chorus girl at a nightclub called Billy Rose's Diamond Horseshoe. His father's name is Frank, and he's a veteran of the U.S. Army Cavalry. Since money is tight, Frank works as a hairdresser, and they send Sylvester to a boarding house during the week, while at home, the arguments are constant. When his brother Frank is born and they move to a better suburb, the fights get even worse. At school, Sylvester has trouble fitting in, and a speech disorder makes it even harder for him to belong. To escape his reality, the movies become his refuge. He spends hours in front of the screen, forgetting everything and dreaming of being a hero like the ones in the movies. When he gets home, he stands in front of the mirror, mimicking gestures and repeating lines. Years later, he would say that one of his favorite characters was Hercules, especially the 1958 version with Steve Reeves, a bodybuilder with an impressive physique. That image of a strong hero was etched in his mind and became his role model. Over time, the relationship between his parents completely falls apart, and they end up getting divorced. Although each goes their separate way, they share custody. His mother moves to Philadelphia and opens a gym for women, while his father settles in a rural area in a house with many shortcomings. Frank spends more time with their mother and Sylvester with their father, who, unfortunately for Sylvester, starts to become violent. To pay the bills, he gets a job as a maintenance manager at a polo club, and both Sylvester and his father start taking care of horses. Over time, horses become Sylvester's great passion, and he starts playing polo. He improves so quickly that he qualifies at the national level, but according to him, his father was never proud of his achievements. To give you an idea of his relationship with his father, Sylvester shared a scene he never forgot. During a polo match, his father came down furiously from the stands, grabbed him by the neck, threw him to the ground in front of everyone, and from that day on, Sylvester never played polo again. Don't forget this scene, because later on he will do something similar, but in front of many cameras. As he grows up, the boy starts having behavioral problems at school, so he is sent to a military school. There, he receives help with his speech problem and gets back on track. Looking at it now, and as he himself says, it seems that his behavior was nothing more than a reflection of the frustration and toxic environment he experienced with his father. After finishing high school, he gets a scholarship to study at a university in Switzerland, where acting starts to become a real possibility. With more maturity, he takes the idea of expressing himself through a character seriously and joins a theater workshop where he reads scripts, learns the craft, and stars in the play Death of a Salesman. And it is in that performance where he finds what he wants to do for the rest of his life. Because of this, when he returns to the United States, he enrolls in improv classes. During this time, he meets John Hirschfeld, with whom he shares a love for cinema and everything that comes with it. They become very close, and after finishing college, they move together to New York with the idea of making their way in the film industry. However, the life of someone who wants to dedicate themselves to art is not easy, and Sylvester has to figure out how to survive without much financial support from his parents. To get by, he works as a lion feeder at a zoo and as an usher at a movie theater. He sleeps wherever he can and adopts Butchus, a sweet bull mastiff with a noble gaze who becomes his only real companion. A creature that doesn't judge him for what he lacks and gives him unconditional companionship. Meanwhile, he goes to every audition he can, but at each casting they tell him he speaks strangely, that his eyes droop, or that he doesn't have the look they're searching for. Harsh comments for someone who dreams of being part of that world. To understand why he faces so much rejection, you have to look at the context in which he's trying to break through as an actor. For a long time, Hollywood followed the same pattern. Attractive protagonists with impeccable values who always came out victorious in the end. Movies like Ben-Hur or The Prince Who Was a Thief reflect that kind of strong hero the audience wanted to see. However, in the 70s, a new generation of filmmakers grew tired of this formula and wanted to tell more realistic stories, which gave Sylvester an opportunity. Meanwhile, the young man continues with his life. He works, falls in love with a photographer named Sasha, and spends his weekends meeting up with his friend John to write together. During one of those writing sessions, a character is born whom he names Rocky, and even though for now it's just a loose idea, it's already in his mind. The guys tried to make their first independent film, one about horses where they put into practice what they've learned, and since they can't afford to record sound, it becomes a silent film. However, even though they shot a lot of footage, they never managed to finish it or release it. After this, Sylvester manages to get close to a director named Woody Allen, who is looking for extras for a movie called Bananas. At first, Allen rejects him because, according to him, he doesn't see him as someone who could intimidate. But this time, Sylvester doesn't take no for an answer. He himself says in an interview that to convince him, he dressed up like a criminal and intimidated the director, which ended up convincing the man and got him the part. It's a small role with little screen time, but it officially marks his entry into the world of cinema. Thanks to this role, he manages to land a part in a film set in the 1950s about a group of tough guys from Brooklyn, the Lords of Flatbush. A story that portrays a group of friends who are part of a street gang. Aimless boys with internal conflicts trapped between rebellion and social pressure. When he starts filming his scenes, he's not satisfied with the script, so he begins to improvise. He rewrites his lines, tries out new attitudes, and brings a lot of himself to the role. This process of modifying the script while acting gives him experience in understanding how a story works from the inside and how he can shape a character to make it more authentic and powerful. A skill he will use in every film and role he directs and acts in. The problem is that this role also ends up typecasting him. From that point on, he starts being offered the same type of character over and over again, a stereotype that, while it gives him work, also closes the door to more complex roles or leading parts. So he realizes that if he wants to stop always playing the same role or act as a protagonist, he's going to have to write his own story. With the approximately $1,300 he earns from the movie, he marries Sasha. Then he packs a suitcase, takes his dog, and together they travel for 11 days to Hollywood in search of different roles and new opportunities. Settled in a humble place with no resources, Sylvester looks for work in the industry, but after a short time without finding any, the situation becomes desperate. His wife becomes pregnant, and neither they nor their dog have anything to eat, so it gets to a point where Sylvester has no choice but to sell his only companion. Butkus is sold for $60 so that at least someone can feed him, and Sylvester can eat and pursue his goal, one of the hardest moments of his life. With a lot of effort, he manages to land small roles, almost always as a gangster or a robber, which weren't really what he wanted, but at least they gave him just enough to survive alongside his wife. This difficult period starts to change when he gets a role in the series Kojak, acting alongside important Hollywood figures, which gives him a bit of a boost. After this, Sylvester continues taking roles while at the same time he starts to further develop the character he had in mind. At first, Sylvester had conceived Rocky as a brutal, violent, and complex guy, but with everything Sylvester has experienced, he decides to give him a twist that will change everything. He chooses to tell the story of a vulnerable and insecure man, almost as if he were a reflection of himself. Once he has that foundation, he looks for a twist to make the story more interesting and finds it by turning him into a boxer. This is how an emotional and epic story is born, with a character people could relate to. Once he has it, he starts pitching his idea to some producers who see potential in the project, and that's why Sylvester locks himself away for 3 days and writes the first draft. When he shows it to them, the producers are impressed, but they think of famous actors to play the role since recognizable faces have more experience and are easier to sell. Sylvester insists that the only way to make the movie is for him to be the lead. But the producers offer him up to $300,000 for the script on the condition that he doesn't act in it. That offer of money is tempting since it would solve many of the financial problems he has been going through and those that are coming, especially since, let's remember, he's about to become a father. It's a very difficult decision, but he stands firm in not selling it. Years later, he explains that he didn't accept the money because he knew it was his only real chance to break into the film industry in a big way and escape being typecast in secondary bad guy roles. And he thought that if he sold it, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The man is so determined and the script is so good that the producers have no other choice and end up agreeing, not wanting to miss the opportunity. They assign him a film director and give him roughly $1 million budget. This, although it sounds like a lot, really isn't when compared to other movies from those years. For example, King Kong, which premiered in 1976, had a budget of $23 million, and on top of that, they had to release the movie in a very short time. When Sylvester's life starts to get back on track and he's about to begin filming, he decides to get his dog Butkus back. But the man he sold him to asks for $3,000 to return him, a sum Sylvester doesn't have. Fortunately, they managed to reach an agreement. He'll return Butkus in exchange for a small role in Rocky. And if you're wondering which scene I'm talking about, it's the one where a man tells Rocky he should take a break. And that man was the one who once had Butkus. With his dog back, the birth of his first son, whom he named Sage, and the strong motivation to make the best movie of his life, Sylvester begins the casting process. More than following technical criteria, Sylvester looks for people he connects with and who share his vision for the story. You've probably already seen this movie, but if not, let me tell you what it's about. Rocky Balboa is an amateur boxer from Philadelphia who lives alone in a small apartment. He doesn't have great opportunities or a clear direction. He's 30 years old, works as a debt collector for a loan shark, and although he still trains from time to time, his career seems stuck. Everything changes when Apollo Creed, the world heavyweight champion, is left without an opponent for his next fight. As a publicity stunt, he decides to pick an unknown boxer and chooses Rocky simply because he likes his nickname, the Italian Stallion. Rocky accepts, aware that it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He starts training with Mickey, an old coach who always believed in his potential. He also begins a relationship with Adrian, a shy young woman who works at a pet store, with whom he forms a genuine connection. While preparing for the fight, Rocky trains with everything he's got, even punching meat in a freezer. When the day of the fight arrives, Apollo doesn't expect his opponent to put up a fight, but Rocky withstands the blows. He falls, gets back up, and pushes him to the limit. In the end, Rocky loses by split decision, but that no longer matters. For the people who came to watch the match, the real winner is him. If you've already noticed, this movie has a lot of Sylvester in it. It's more or less how his life has been in the world of cinema. And if I say he puts a lot of himself into the character, it's because in one scene he used his own life to give it the emotion it needed. I'm talking about the scene where he reproaches his trainer for not being there for him in the past, with the line, "I needed you 10 years ago, and you weren't there when I needed you." Sylvester says that at that moment, he felt as if he were speaking to his own father through Rocky. Finally, the day of the premiere arrives, the most important moment of his life. The movie is shown at the New York theater where he used to work, dreaming that one day he would be on the big screen. Now that dream is very close to coming true, but if anything goes wrong, the doors of Hollywood could close forever. He says that at that moment, he stood behind the audience to watch their reactions, and when the most exciting moment arrived, when Rocky knocks down his rival, the whole theater stood up and celebrated the punch with such intense energy that it felt like everyone was inside the fight. That moment marks a before and after for Sylvester. It's the moment when his effort stops going unnoticed and the film becomes a resounding success. Rocky quickly reaches the top spot in Hollywood, which opens many doors for the actor. The impact is so great that his life changes completely. The film ends up generating approximately $160 million at the box office, and with that, he goes from having almost nothing to becoming someone for whom money is no longer a problem. The film receives several nominations for major awards, including the Golden Globe. But what surprises the whole world is when it is awarded the Oscar for Best Picture. The room erupts in applause. The producers go up on stage and call Sylvester to join them. When it's Sylvester's turn to speak, he simply says, "Thank you to all the Rockies in the world. I love you." But why? Why did a movie with such a low budget and such a simple story become so successful? To begin with, a key factor was that it broke the mold. Until then, movie protagonists seemed to come straight out of a display case. Physically perfect men with strong principles, immaculate, who defeated the villain, got the girl, and embodied the ideal of the aspirational hero. And suddenly, Rocky Balboa appears, a guy from the neighborhood, aimless, without great talents, with downcast eyes and a messy life, with an ordinary job, training in a dusty gym, quiet, insecure. Someone who, yes, didn't conquer the world, but also didn't let it swallow him up. He didn't have anything extraordinary, and that's exactly why he felt real. Moreover, it's clear that if Rocky felt so relatable, it was because Stallone wrote him as a reflection of himself. Stallone also came from humble beginnings. He grew up with a violent father, with facial paralysis that marked his face forever, with constant rejections from producers who told him he didn't fit the part, that his voice was useless, that his face didn't work, and who had to sell his dog just to eat. He's someone who failed and was beaten down by life, but like Rocky, he fought back. And when he finally managed to get his script turned into a movie, he also fought to star in it. They offered him an amount of money that would have solved his life, but he didn't accept because he knew that story only made sense if he was the one to tell it, since deep down it was his own life disguised as boxing. That, I think, made his words at the award ceremony even more poetic. "Thank you to all the Rockies in the world. I love you." He said it because he knew there are millions like him. Ordinary men, with regular jobs, with real problems. Men who get up early, who endure, who fail, but who try again, who don't make the headlines, but who every day in one way or another get up to fight. That story was for them, and that's why I think it became eternal. And by fighting back, I don't just mean trying again, they have other ways too, but we'll discover those later in his life. Now Sylvester has respect, recognition, and for the first time, the chance to choose his projects. One of them is Fist, symbol of strength, where he plays Johnny Kovac, a worker who joins a union and eventually becomes its leader, showing how power can blur anyone's ideals. The problem is that the film doesn't quite connect with the audience or the critics, marking the beginning of a new stage in his life. On one hand, he has more stability, and his wife is pregnant again, something that should fill him with joy. But along with that happiness comes the pressure of the public's expectations, who now expect him to repeat Rocky's success. That burden starts to weigh on him more than he imagined, affecting his peace of mind and his relationship with Sasha. With that pressure on his shoulders, Sylvester decides to write again, but this time he dares to direct and star in his own movie, Paradise Alley. The story follows three brothers who grow up in Hell's Kitchen, the neighborhood where he was born during the 1940s, showing how one of them gets involved in professional wrestling. But critics tear it apart, questioning his direction, his acting, and his talent as a writer. And since he was in charge of everything, the blow feels personal. In a written interview with Roger Ebert in 1980, Stallone says that the original version was much longer and deeper, but Universal Pictures cut it down to make it more dynamic. In response to this, Sylvester decides not to give up and instead doubles down with the sequel to Rocky. His goal is to repeat the success even though he knows it's a risk, since at that time sequels usually disappointed and many advised him not to do it. Even so, he picks the story back up. Rocky leaves the hospital with Adrian, gets married, buys a modest house, and they prepare to start a family when she becomes pregnant. He tries to stay away from boxing and looks for jobs, but nothing works out for him and the debts keep piling up. Meanwhile, Apollo Creed also faces criticism questioning his victory, so he publicly challenges Rocky to a rematch. Rocky is caught between returning to the ring or keeping his promise to be a family man. The story reflects his own life, giving the character a humanity that anyone can relate to. During filming, he gets deeply involved in the production. The commitment is total, but it takes a toll on him. He's with his family, but his mind is still on the movie, completely absorbed by the work. In 1979, Rocky II premieres, a key moment in his career that will determine whether his previous success was just a stroke of luck or the beginning of something big. And against all odds, the sequel becomes his second major hit, doubling the box office of the first and proving that sequels can work. Amidst that success, his second son Sergio is born, giving him new motivation to keep moving forward. However, behind the Hollywood lights, Sylvester feels a great emptiness. In an interview, he admits that after achieving his dream and proving what he was capable of, he no longer knows what's next or what his purpose is. When things settle down, he takes on new jobs while searching for his direction. He acts in Victory, where he plays a prisoner of war who plans to escape during a soccer match against a Nazi team, and later in Nighthawks as an undercover cop chasing a terrorist. In the original script for the second film, his character died, but Rocky opposed this creative decision and fortunately managed to save him. Although these movies don't have the impact of his major hits, they allow him to stay active. And maybe that's exactly what he needs, because personally, he's going through two very difficult moments. Over the years, his relationship with Sasha, who had been with him from the beginning, falls apart and they decide to separate. Additionally, when his youngest son is almost 3 years old, he is diagnosed with autism, something Sylvester describes as a hard blow upon learning about the limitations his son would face. From then on, his family life becomes more complex, with moments of calm interrupted by crises that shake everything up. In the midst of all this, a project emerges that seems to serve as a personal outlet. Almost at the same time he is working on Rocky III, he is offered the lead role in Rambo, an action movie based on the novel First Blood by David Morrell, with a good story and great potential for success. If you haven't seen it, let me summarize it for you. The story follows a former soldier struggling to adapt to civilian life as he travels across the United States. On one of these trips, he arrives in Hope, a mountain town in Washington, where he has a run-in with the sheriff, a Korean War veteran who arrests him. At the police station, Rambo is beaten and forced to shower, which triggers memories of his time as a prisoner of war. When they try to shave him, he snaps, attacks the officers, steals a motorcycle, and escapes into the mountains. The police can't catch him since Rambo is skilled in guerrilla tactics. The sheriff calls for military backup, but Troutman, his former commanding officer, shows up and warns them about the danger of treating him like an ordinary criminal. He knows what Rambo has been through and what he is capable of if he feels cornered. During filming, Sylvester fully immerses himself in the role. He talks to veterans, draws inspiration from his father, who was also a former soldier, and shapes Rambo as a man tough on the outside but broken on the inside. He trains intensely for the combat scenes and decides that Rambo should speak as little as possible. He wanted everyone to understand through his gaze and body language to show a man completely alone, burdened by what he can no longer say. As an interesting and important fact, when Sylvester discovered that the script ended with Rambo's death, he walked off the set, breaking his contract. He knew he was breaking it, but he was so uncomfortable with it that he didn't care. He only returned once they agreed to change the ending and allowed Rambo to survive. Fortunately for Sylvester, this story became a huge success. It placed him at the top of action cinema, a genre where he finally fit in and found his place. Upon entering this world, a rivalry with Arnold Schwarzenegger emerged. Although there was competition for roles and box office, both respected each other, and that rivalry pushed them to outdo themselves. Sylvester takes advantage of the momentum to release Rocky IV with the same emotional tone, but with more spectacle and patriotism. And Rambo 2, a more explosive sequel focused on action. Both are box office hits and take him to the highest point of his commercial career. Although Rocky and Rambo establish him as one of the faces of cinema, he also seeks to branch out with other films. He appears in Over the Top, which is a mix of family drama and strength competitions that goes unnoticed at its release, but over time becomes a cult film. Later on, he stars in Tango and Cash alongside Kurt Russell, which does well at the box office despite its production problems. After years of explosions and chases on screen, Sylvester begins to diversify his life beyond cinema. He forms a polo team so that he and his father can participate in matches, facing off with their respective teams. This initiative leads them to compete in important venues including the Wellington Field, considered the most prestigious in the world. However, his father remains a troubled man, and during a match documented by the media, Frank once again acts violently. He hits his son from behind with such force that he knocks him off his horse. Everything is caught on video. After the match, a press conference is held where Sylvester takes the microphone and, in front of everyone, says, "If you notice, the first and only low blow of the match was delivered by a father to his son." That moment marks a boundary. From that point on, he decides to distance himself completely. He sells the horses, the team, the truck, and everything related to that world. This kind of relationship can affect anyone, but perhaps it's precisely that which motivates Sylvester to write his own story as a father. After everything he went through, he gets to work on creating the fifth Rocky movie. In this installment, he is no longer the absolute center of the story because he writes a role specifically for his eldest son, Sage, whom he includes in the film. He releases Cliffhanger, an action movie with spectacular scenes in the mountains. Then comes The Specialist, a tense thriller. Judge Dredd, a dark comic book adaptation. And Assassins, another suspense thriller. One of his best roles comes with Copland, where he plays a sheriff in a small town, showing a more human and relatable side. The critics receive him very well, highlighting his ability to take on complex characters that are different from those he used to play. On a personal level, he finds stability, marries Jennifer Flavin, and they start a family with 3 daughters. However, when the 2000s arrive, his career enters a difficult phase. The projects he works on no longer manage to stand out or generate the same impact as before. So he decides to use his 2 infallible cards, Rocky and Rambo. In 2006, he chooses to return with Rocky Balboa, which would be the 6th installment of his most personal saga. In this film, Rocky is a former heavyweight champion who has been away from boxing for 20 years. He still lives in the same neighborhood as always and runs a restaurant named after Adrian, the great love of his life who has passed away. The relationship with his son isn't the best, since the boy struggles to live with his father's shadow and the weight of his last name. At one point in the film, when his son confronts him and asks him not to expose himself like that in the media, there's a very important conversation where it seems that Sylvester, through Rocky, is leaving a message for his son and a reminder for himself. The world isn't all sunshine and rainbows, it's a mean and very tough place. And it doesn't matter how tough you are, it'll put you on your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. Neither you, nor I, nor anyone is going to hit as hard as life. But it doesn't matter how hard you hit, what matters is how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. And if you know how much you're worth, go out and get what you deserve, but you have to be willing to take the hits and not blame others, saying, "I'm not what I want to be because of him or her or anyone." Cowards do that, and you're not one of them. You're better than that, son. Shortly after, he released Rambo 4, and by 2010, he premiered The Expendables. But in the midst of all this, another important moment happens in his personal life. Sylvester publicly shares images of himself visiting his father in his final days. Frank is on his deathbed when he says something that leaves him deep in thought. "You know, you should learn to love and forgive people," he tells him in a weak voice. And he, with a mix of irony and pain, replies, "Did this just occur to you when the damn angels are about to whisper in your ear? As if you just had an epiphany." His father simply nods and says, "Yes, I did." And the following year, something even worse happens. His eldest son, Sage, suddenly passes away at the age of 36. He was an actor, director, and had founded his own independent production company, all with the support and affection of his father. He was married, had projects underway, and a whole life ahead of him. The official cause was a heart attack, the result of an undiagnosed coronary disease. The news moves the entire world and leaves Sylvester completely devastated. I think that even though Sage had a short life, it was surely, at least in part thanks to his father, a better life than the one Sylvester had. And having given him that life, to me, is another way we have of fighting back. It doesn't just mean resisting, persisting, or getting up over and over again. Sometimes fighting back means choosing to be different from how life treated us, breaking the cycle, and giving something better than what you received. Sylvester's father marked him with violence, absence, and humiliations that were never fully resolved. And yet, when it was his turn to be a father, he chose something different. He supported Sage in his dreams, they worked together, he accompanied him in his career, gave him space, support, and affection. He did what his own father had not been able to do for him. And that too is a form of resistance, one that can change entire generations. Even with that pain, he continues on with his career. In 2014, he released The Expendables 3, and a year later he returned to the Rocky universe with Creed, where he was no longer the protagonist but the mentor of the new boxer, Adonis, the son of Apollo Creed. His performance moved both critics and audiences, earning him a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor. In addition to an Oscar nomination, something that hadn't happened to him since the first Rocky, it is recognition not only of the character but of the journey of his entire career. In 2018, he returned with Creed 2, and the following year released Rambo: Last Blood, which would be, at least for now, the last installment of the war veteran. After that, Sylvester began to expand his presence into other formats and genres. He appears in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and later in Volume 3, playing Stacker, a minor character but one with great symbolic weight. In The Suicide Squad, he lends his voice to King Shark, a role that surprises for how different it is and for the humor he brings. Currently, Sylvester Stallone remains active in multiple areas. In addition to his acting career, he is also dedicated to art. He paints, collects, and offers some of his works at charity auctions. His public image is built not only on screen, but also through his commitment to social causes and acts of solidarity. His net worth exceeds $400 million, but what truly defines him is his capacity for hard work, transformation, and resilience in the face of challenges. He became a symbol of perseverance both inside and outside of cinema. Throughout his career, Sylvester played many tough, muscular types who went up against enemies bigger than themselves. But what truly set them apart was not their strength, but their heart. They were characters who knew what pain and wounds were, but still had the capacity to love and to care. Especially Rocky, a character who came to remind us that you can be strong without being cruel and resilient without turning to stone. On more than one occasion, Sylvester refused to let his characters die, even when, symbolically, that's what the script called for. And that says a lot about him, about how the idea terrified him, because deep down, maybe that boxer who kept fighting, that soldier who kept trying, or that prisoner who sought to escape were stories trying to say that it couldn't end here. There was still something more to give. A life philosophy that he summed up perfectly in that final speech, where he reminded his son, himself, and all of us that nobody hits as hard as life does. But it's not about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, because that's how you win. Not by letting life's blows define you, but by choosing what to do after you take them. Thank you very much for making it to the end of this video. Remember, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you can do it right now and it would help me a lot. And you and I will see each other in the next video.